The title of your book is Growing Up Southern, How the South Shapes Its Writers. So my first question for you, how does the South shape its writers?
We asked that question to these 13 writers that we interviewed, and what makes a Southern writer? What is a Southern writer? And is a Southern writer any different from, say, a writer out west or in the East or something like that? And most said that the writers in the South may not be, they classify themselves as writers per se. They view themselves as Southern writers because they live in the South, but they're Americans nonetheless. They're very American, very Southern. But place is a big thing with Southern writers. Place, home, people, that sort of thing. Whereas the West may be writing larger writers may write on larger themes and everything. The South seems to be a little more compact. At least these writers that we interviewed, all who were born before World War II, that was sort of their definition of it. Yes, I'm a Southern writer, but I'm an American too as well. I write about Southern themes that all Americans can appreciate and enjoy. When we interviewed Shelby Foote, the great Southern writer and author from Memphis, we asked Shelby that same question about being a Southern writer and what is it about the South that makes a writer Southern. And Shelby says, when he was a child and he got into say a fist fight or something, he says, the fights you lose are the ones you remember. And of course the South was on the losing end of the as we say, the late unpleasantness, the war between the states, or the Civil War. And that's the one we remember. And you write about those stories. It creates tension. The South was wrong in that war, but it didn't think it was. And so we have a built-in kind of tension already in our lives. Most of the Southerners my age, Jeannie's age, that generation that we interviewed, recall readily, the Civil War, and had either grandparents or great-grandparents that they could recall having either met, talked to, heard. In Shelby's case, he even interviewed some of the Civil War veterans when he was a youngster. So it's that presence of mind, that connection to the land, the people, our history, that creates all this tension, I think, in the South, or it did, or does. And we tend to write about that.
There's a funny anecdote about Shelby. When we went to his house, we drove to Memphis from Knoxville, and he lived in this house which sort of looked like an old mansion. I guess it was an old mansion.
It was, yeah.
And we came in this creaky gate, and Shelby leaned out of a second-story window and said, "Good morning, I'll be right down." He had this wonderful Southern accent. So I was looking around the garden. It was all grown over, weeds. There was a fountain there covered with moss. And when he came down, I said, "I love your garden. It's just wonderful." And he said, "It's in disarray now. The man who took care of it has left." And I said, "I'm sure he'll be back." He said, "No, I believe he shot a man." And that's, I mean, a lot of Southerners are so matter of fact and just accepting of things like that. And there's a real closeness to, say, grandparents and people who themselves were storytellers. And a lot of the Southern writers said that as children, the old people told them their stories and then they'd say, "You tell me your story," which made them think even more about their lives and growing up in the South.
How do you respond to the criticism that people may say that Southern writers, or just the South, is too caught up in the past?
Well, I think it's like Shelby said, that war that we lost is the one you remember. And that's the one that Southerners write a lot about. But when we interviewed, was it Betsy, not Betsy Cox, but Lee Smith,
Lee Smith.
and and Doris Betts. They told us that, you know, the students today have a different South that they're writing about. They teach in the University of North Carolina, and those students may come up and write stories that are very Southern, and yet their places are like in the great these strip malls and the cities that have changed dramatically since I was born, since Jeanne was born, and since those authors were born that we write about in this book, growing up Southern. And but it's still a Southern theme. Those Southern tensions are there. And I think Shelby was really right about this overall picture of how Southerners are very close to their history. We're very close to our family is big in the South, as is extended family. I have a newspaper friend who says, we're all cousins in the South anyway. And I think to a certain extent that that's kind of true, that we may be looking back, but our writers, for the most part, write. I mean, you can read William Faulkner today, and be just as stunned by what he's saying today as they were in the 30s when he was writing these great, wonderful novels about the South of the past, the South of his grandfathers, and which was the Civil War. You can read those stories today and be just as moved by those same themes as were the readers of the 30s, 40s. I don't know that we're always looking in the past. I know that the past has shaped us. As Faulkner says, the past is not dead, it's not even past, you know. I think we're haunted by what happened in the past and how we came through that as a people. You know, it made us stronger. I, for one, think that we're vastly better off and stronger for having gone through the civil rights, the Civil War, civil rights movement, and now I think today, if you look at the South, we're I think we're very forward, and I think we've been blessed to have had some of the writers who we've had, such as Willie Morris and Eudora Welty and others, to really help us reflect what happened to us here.